Oh, you got your pile?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, here we go. Welcome to Silver and Black today, an Odyssey Original podcast covering your Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, it is a monumentous day. Things are going crazy, and so we appreciate you being with us here on Silver and Black today. So thank you for being with us. And we are here to talk about what? I mean, Mo, there's not been anything going on today, right? A couple of firings, a couple comings, a couple goings. And you were with Scott Gulbransen and Moe Moton. Mo's the national senior writer covering the NFL at Bleacher Report. You can catch him on Bleacher Report Live, which he does about the Raiders. He also is the Raiders columnist where I work at sportsnot.com. And you can follow him on Twitter at MOEMOTON. He's been very active today. Follow me at LV Gully. Excuse me, Mo. I did an earlier show this morning. Just
Scott, you choked up over the news?
I'm choked up
because of the news?
Okay. I missed the lots of, things.
All that scoring? You're going to miss all that scoring, aren't you?
And
the field goals.
The press conferences, and
Come on, Scott.
Sorry. Okay, I'm back. So, no, yeah. So we haven't had a chance to talk to you, Mo, since this morning because you were busy and things were going crazy for everybody in every kind of way. But the surprise here is not the firing of Josh McDaniels or Dave Ziegler, frankly, because we've been talking about that for a week or two as well. But the timing, maybe. I really believed in my heart of hearts that this would happen after the Giants game. Win or lose, perhaps, especially if the offense continued to sputter. But give me your reaction. You were not surprised. I was not surprised. The national media was like, oh, my gosh, they did this. I don't know why they were surprised, but the son channels the father, gets angry, and fires the coach, this time with a lot of good reason. But walk me through your initial thoughts when you got that notification come across your phone in the middle of the night.
So story time with Midtown Mo here. It's past 1 a.m. Eastern time zone already, and my phone just starts lighting up, and I'm thinking, okay, some NBA player just scored 50 points or something like that. So I'm like, first I kind of just glanced and just said, go back to what I was doing because I'm writing my betting column. But my phone just keeps flashing. I'm like, okay, what's going on? I look at my phone and I'm thinking he finally did it. Mark Davis finally did it because what have I been saying for the past, I don't know, 3-4 weeks? What more do we need to see?
Yes.
Right. And that question was a rhetorical question for Mark Davis. What more do you need to see to know that Josh McDaniels is not that guy? What surprised me is a lot of people are willing to give Dave Ziegler a pass because a lot of people have asked, Mo, if the Raiders fire Josh McDaniels, does Dave Ziegler go with him? And I've always answered yes. Not because they came in as a package deal, but because if you look at his 2 draft classes, and we've said this on the show, what player out of those 2 draft classes are you thinking that guy is going to be special? The best thing that came out of the 2022 draft class is Dylan Parham is an average baseline level guard, right?
Right.
And then this year's class, it looks like Michael Mayer could be a starting tight end on this level, but Josh McDaniels hasn't been featuring him in the offense. Same thing with Trey Tucker. He can take the top of a defense, but you have a quarterback who can't throw accurately down 20 yards down the field. So between the inept offense, the rookies and from the previous 2 years not contributing very much, it's no surprise to me that Dave Ziegler was let go. And I said it on the X that Dave Ziegler deserves some criticism for this. Now, Josh McDaniels is the main person here because he's not using a lot of the players some of the players that Dave Ziegler drafted. Mm-hmm. But again, not much production out of the rookie class. That's on your GM because as I explained to someone, your head coach has usually a short-term plan for the team. What are we going to do day to day, week to week? The general manager's job is to set a long-term vision and direction. And we've had callers and emailers tell us they don't even know what the direction this team is, and we agree.
Yeah. And it's one of those deals where, and I've been saying this all day, and I want to get your point of view. They came in as a package, they leave as a package. I wonder though if Mark Davis did in fact fire them both at the same time, or if he said, "Hey, Dave, need you to fire Josh. We're going to get rid of Josh," and then Ziegler said, "Nah, if he goes, I goes." I don't know. I'm just. It's complete conjecture. I'm just guessing. But I was surprised by the Ziegler portion of it, as my dog is about to knock over my light here. Excuse me. It was about to hit me in the head. But you know, I don't know what happened, and I don't know that Mark Davis will ever tell us. But you're absolutely right. The team was crap on the field from an offensive standpoint. And here's an offensive genius, a guy who ran offenses. Mark Davis, in his heart of hearts, was trying to do the right thing, hires a guy from the most successful organization in the NFL over the last 25 years. Okay, so he does that, but again, the guy shows that he's pretty much a fraud because he couldn't do it. He couldn't run the team. And I don't know if you saw the interview on FanDuel TV this afternoon with Rob Gronkowski, who talked about why he didn't feel maybe McDaniels is successful, that he knows his football, he's really bright, but that he has trouble relating to people. Okay, so how do you lead men into battle, whether it's football or otherwise, if you can't relate to people? And I think this is what we saw. We saw, for all that we can talk about Derek Carr, all that jazz from last year, you know, maybe there was not a connection there. Then there was not a connection with Darren Waller. Then there was not a connection with Hunter Renfrow. It became clear, Mo, that this guy's personality is just not a fit to do the role of a head coach. And again, he didn't last as many games in Vegas as he did in Denver. It was a complete repeat of Denver. So all of you who didn't want this to happen from the beginning, who said, this guy stinks, and it wasn't just that, you were right. You were absolutely correct. Those of us that said, oh, give the guy a chance, all that, we were wrong. That's the way it goes. We were wrong. We thought, hey, first press conference, remember, Mo? They asked him about that. Well, I've matured, I've changed, I learned from that. He didn't. And here we are today.
I don't think there's anything wrong with second chances, right? So we know that he failed over a decade ago in Denver. And you talk about that introductory press conference, and he said he learned from his mistakes. He talked about relationships directly. He mentioned that almost verbatim. It's about, building relationships in the building.
Right.
And then you see reports about him having a fractured relationship with Hunter Renfrow that came out from Jordan Schultz, who's over at Bleacher Report, the new NFL insider over there. Fractured relationship with Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow is not getting snaps on the field. If you read, I believe it was Vic Tafur of The Athletic wrote about how Darren Waller's wedding situation, about how Josh McDaniels kind of leaked it to the media. And then there was some issues about him, putting it out there, and then the Las Vegas Review-Journal writing about it, or putting out the announcement that he was having a wedding, and Darren Waller didn't really like that. Read Vic Tafur's piece if you want to catch up on that. So there's fractured relationship there as well too.
Yeah, I was going to say Vic's piece, the one you're talking about, where he kind of goes through the reasoning of why it happened the way it did, was enlightening. And for those of you, because I've seen some people who are like, oh, see, the beat writers didn't ask these questions. A lot of times, and Mo and I can speak to this, we don't do the breaking news. We don't do the jobs that those guys do covering the Raiders. Okay, it's a different animal. But Mo and I both have people that we talk to with inside information, right? We don't report on it a lot because it's one source a lot, and sometimes we'll talk about it and we'll work it into our show. But we also need to protect those people. They give us insight. They give us direction. And Vic talked about that in his story today, because he talked about the biggest leaks in the building were Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels. So now that they're gone, he can kind of be like, well, okay, I'm going to tell you. Now, I don't know who they talked to. He also joked that they considered him too negative, so Dave Ziegler wouldn't talk to him, which tells you a lot again. And we mentioned that about the Belichick influence, right? Which is it's you don't talk to the media.
Did you catch what Vic wrote about how they want players to kind of stay away from the media? He said daily warnings about the media.
Correct.
So there were, I guess, employees of the Raiders monitoring players' social media accounts.
Yes.
So I can imagine what that building was going through when Chandler Jones was posting all the things that he was saying.
Right. And for those of you who got angry when they turned off the comments after the Chicago game, maybe you have some insight now. Maybe because they're watching and they know other things we don't know. But I do know this. I do know that, that paints a picture. And I've been in a couple of workplaces, Mo, where you had paranoid leaders. Paranoid leaders, because usually paranoid leaders are weak leaders. So for them to maintain control, they clamp down, right? It's a hallmark. I mean, you look at dictators too. If you want to study history, it's the same thing, right? They're so impotent that they have to force people into these things. But meanwhile, they're both leaking stuff to the media, which we all knew they were doing because you could tell it was going to NFL Network to these guys, right? It was being fed there. And some of these stories about, well, they were the one I love this year. I got to just a quick aside was that they tried to move up to get CJ Stroud. It was all BS. Come on, that was from after CJ Stroud has this great start. Then suddenly one of those guys was leaking, oh, yeah, we were up on him. We almost had him, but yeah, no, not so much. But anyway, so you get some insight there inside baseball. But it's fascinating to talk about it now because these guys will talk about it more freely because they're gone. But it was the right choice by Mark Davis, and I want to wait until the second segment to dive deep on Mark Davis. I wrote a piece on him today with an idea about what he should do. But overall, we heard, too, from a lot of people last week, that, he hasn't lost the locker room. You know what? I credit the team and the mature leaders on that team like Davante Adams, who back to the summer and at the beginning of the season was sending signals that it was already lost. We didn't see it per se, but it was already lost because those guys were speaking out and they were doing it in code. And it goes to show you that the fracture that brought about this meeting that had no impact on the game on Monday really was probably the final straw, as was the offensive performance of this team on Monday night against the Lions.
To me, it all started in the offseason when Davante Adams had that sit down with Marin Fader. Shout out to her.
Yeah.
And he basically, I don't want to say criticized the front office, but remember the quote was he doesn't see eye to eye with the front office, and he actually had concerns about how is a quarterback going to get me the football the way I want to get the football downfield. And I think he kind of said it without saying it about, is Jimmy Garoppolo's arm good enough to get me, those 25, 30-yard passes downfield? Now, he didn't mention Jimmy Garoppolo or criticize Jimmy Garoppolo directly, right. But if you read between the lines, you can see that he had concerns about the quarterback position in the passing game. And a lot of people wanted to kind of downplay a little bit, but Davante Adams, as we know, very candid with his comments. He has been since he's been a Raider. He was when he was with the Green Bay Packers. I'm sure Packers fans will agree with me on that one. But he kind of voiced his concerns in the offseason. And then if you remember Josh Jacobs, when he was going through his bump with contract negotiations with the team, he had one post that said bad business, or he said something about bad business. Yes. And of course, It was very indirect. It wasn't connected to the Raiders, but you wonder, he's in a contract negotiation period and he says bad business. You put two and two together and you think, oh, he's talking about the Raiders.
Yes. And I think there was a lot of that. Like I said, there was a lot of code spoken. And listen, when I'm wrong, I'll admit it. And I think, too, a lot of the things that I said coming out of the offseason when Davante Adams' comments were in context, but then also used out of context. We were wrong about that. I mean, it's just, or those of us who believe that, we were wrong about it because I think he was sending signals. And Jimmy Garoppolo, the other thing that Vic's piece, and it was so well done, I thought, and if you don't get The Athletic, I'm sorry, but it's worth the read, is how he laid out the Garoppolo signing and how every step of the way, Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels were a little bit like the kids with a new toy and they didn't quite know how to use it. And even the quote Mark Davis that he put in there, right, where Mark Davis was like, well, he's young and he's inexperienced. He needs to learn, blah, blah, blah. That type of stuff happened. And you look at it and you look at the contracts, and we'll get into the contracts in a minute. We had some requests for us people to look into those contracts. But it just seems like these guys, Mark Davis put his trust in them. It's like the proverbial person comes in, Mo, with a great resume on paper, and then they get in the building and they're like, whoa, look good on paper, but it's not looking good here.
We'll get into the contracts, but I think we touched on this. And I wrote a piece on Sportsnot talking about how the Raiders botched the Hunter Renfrow deal.
Yes, you did.
We talked about how they botched the Derek Carr deal, giving him a no-trade clause and allowing him to leave without getting any draft capital for him. We talked about Darren Waller and how we wouldn't have paid Darren Waller, but they paid him. But then let him go, traded him for less than what they could have got when they kept the status quo in the previous year. So they could have got a second-round pick for Darren Waller from the Green Bay Packers. They kept the status quo. I guess they had a fallout with the whole wedding situation. They traded for a third-round pick. So between Derek Carr, Hunter Renfrow, Josh Jacobs had his hiccups with them, but he got his modified franchise tag deal. And Darren Waller, like, you're looking at the front office and saying, holy cow, they're a step behind. I said this on my Bleacher Report Live, that it seems like the Raiders are just operating not just a step behind, but 5 steps behind other teams when it comes to contract signings.
Yeah, and we saw in Los Angeles when the Raiders played the Chargers, of course, the now two infamous videos. The one where Mark Davis is apparently calling somebody an a-hole. It appears that was accurate now. And that's okay. Then he said the smarten up thing, which might have been his own way of saying smarten up. I know what's going on. But what was interesting too was the reports that came out today that after the win, the last win against the Patriots, that Mark Davis was a man on fire, walking around the Raiders facility, ornery, pissed off, and he wanted a pound of flesh. So clearly this has been big. And you and I called on, hey, Mark Davis, we got to hear from you. And it's interesting because he's like Mount Vesuvius. It's quiet, 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 and then just blows the top, right? And that's what happened. That's why that's the only reason I was surprised at the timing, was just because we hadn't heard. Usually you hear a little bit of, well, yeah, I'm not happy with the way things are going. And then it progresses and then gone, right? This was just boom.
Scott, before I got on with you about, I would say half hour before I got on live, I said, don't get it twisted. Mark Davis is Al Davis's son. And if you read, we talked about Vic Tafer's piece. If you read Albert Breer's piece, you'll get the skinny on how it kind of boiled to the surface at Raiders headquarters. He was upset after the Green Bay Packers win. Right. After the Raiders beat the Green Bay Packers on that walk-off interception from Amik Robertson, he went into the Raiders headquarters and Albert Breer uses these words. He says, volatile and angry after a win. The frustration that Devontae Adams showed after a win, a lot of people said Devontae Adams should shut up and play ball because they the football game. Mark Davis wasn't happy either after a win because he could see the train rolling in the wrong direction. And again, if you read that Albert Breer piece, you would understand he had that Raiders headquarters on eggshells.
And not only that, but he did have a post-game meeting as well.
Yes.
That no one heard of. So, I mean, the Raiders and the paranoia around the media clearly worked because nobody heard about it. Previously under John Gruden, news of meetings with Mark Davis after games in the locker room leaked out very quickly, right during the post-game festivities, if you will. So I get that. And you're right. He was not happy. All right, we're going to take a quick break here for our audio audience, our YouTube audience. Stay right where you are. We'll be back in just a few seconds. This is Mo and Scott. This is our special edition of the podcast, live on a Wednesday, or if you're listening to us on Thursday morning as usual, talking about the firing of Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler, and also Nick Lombardi, by the way. We'll talk about that in a few minutes as there are lots of changes going on with the Raiders. But this is Silver and Black today. We'll be right back. All right, here we are back, Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Do us a favor, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your audio. If you're watching us on the YouTubes, thank you very much. And make sure you subscribe and hit the notifications bell. And make sure that when you do that, you scream at the loudest point of your voice, Midtown Mo! Okay, and he'll hear you. Maybe he'll send you a t-shirt. All right, I am Scott Gulbransen. I am with my partner in crime here. He is Moe Moton, national NFL writer, senior NFL writer. I say national all the time. I should say senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report. Get it right. And also a Raiders columnist on sportsnot.com. Mo, we talked about, they also relieved Nick Lombardi of his duties. Don't know. Usually that doesn't happen because he wasn't a true offensive coordinator in the sense of the word, because Josh McDaniels pretty much called the offense on a game-by-game basis. But who knows? The closeness there between the Lombardi family and the Belichicks and the whole New England thing, maybe that was part of it. Not sure. But of course, they part ways with him as well. There's also there was a parting of ways with their COO and executive vice president, which I seem to be the only one who cared. I reported it. I got that from inside the building. But it goes to show you there's a lot of changes going on, and That's worrisome on one level, Mr. Moton, but at the same time, like you said, you don't continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. If you recognize you've made an error, like the guy we're talking about in the front office, he was there 3 months and they fired him this week. So I've always learned that you're slow to hire, quick to fire. That's what I've always been told in the corporate world when I had to hire teams of people. So when you look at this, might we have dysfunction in different parts of the business too? That it's not, I mean, obviously the business side of the Raiders is doing well, but the football side, there's clearly things were not working from head to toe.
I can't speak on the front office firings, but I will say that the Mick Lombardi firing makes sense simply because if you're trying to divorce yourself from the Patriot way, it would make sense to let go of Mick Lombardi, who was under Josh McDaniels. Because then again, if Josh McDaniels' offense was ineffective, how do we know that Mick Lombardi is not going to just run a similar the same offense system? Yeah. So you have to just kind of, I don't want to say start fresh, because they elevated Bo Hardigree, who's the quarterback's coach. He's a former assistant of Adam Gase, who was the former New York Jets head coach, who the Jets wanted to run out of town pretty quickly. But they're giving Bo Hardigree a shot to call the plays, is my guess, since they elevated him to offensive coordinator, and he'll have a shot to show what he could do. He could be one of the bright young minds coming up in the NFL. Who knows? But it's clear to me that Mark Davis is completely done with the Patriot way after 20-something odd games.
Yeah, and the other news, and we didn't cover it at the top of the show, that goes along with this, and we'll get into the coaching situation, interim coach, of course, Antonio Pierce in just a minute. But they've already basically said Aiden O'Connell's starting. So they're going to Aiden O'Connell and Jimmy Garoppolo. And just think about 2024. He may be on the street or a $28 million backup. So thank you, Dave Ziegler, for that gift as you leave. That's your parting gift to the Raiders. So you look at that, and I want to touch on that because I had somebody reach out to us on X.com and say, hey, would you talk about these contracts? And you covered a lot of them already. When you look at the ones that are gone now, the players are gone, but you're still paying Chandler Jones. I don't know what kind of recourse they have there because of his issues. And now with McDaniels gone, do they try to work it out with him? Is he healthy? Is he mentally stable? Does he come back into the picture? I mean, they're paying him. Who knows? Maybe there's a way to do it. I doubt it, just because of how crazy he was. And of course, he spoke out against the owner as well. But you have that contract. You have the Hunter Renfrow, who they can obviously move on from next year. They still got to pay him, I think, $10 million out the door. But you have these contracts there, and the Jimmy Garoppolo contract now looms very large over the future of this team as they try to piece it together, which is why I think they go out and they're going to get a coach who's going to bring in a system. And you're going to take, I mean, I know Raider fans don't want to hear it because they're excited tonight because he's gone. But I think this is just, it's a big reset button, Mo. And I don't mean that they can't be competitive. I'm not saying they're going to get worse. But I do think that with the limitations they may have, it might take a little bit longer than fans want.
So two things I want to make clear here. Notice as soon as Josh McDaniels is out of the building, the first thing they did was elevate Aiden O'Connell to the starting position. What does that tell you? It was Josh McDaniels who was, I want to say, holding Aiden O'Connell back, but not allowing the kid to get a start from the beginning of the game. Not coming in when you're down by 3 scores in the fourth quarter at a garbage time. But it was basically Josh McDaniels who made the mistake. And if you remember me referencing the Albert Breer piece,
yeah.
Now, Josh McDaniels had a decision to make once Jimmy Garoppolo was hurt. Was it going to be Aiden O'Connell or Brian Hoyer? It seems to me, if you read that piece, that the Brian Hoyer decision didn't go over well with the locker room. I'll just say that, all right? The other thing I want to point out is with Jimmy Garoppolo's contracts, I know a lot of people are worried about this because they're paying him bridge quarterback money. Albert Breer pointed this out on the X earlier today that while the Raiders are gonna pay him that $11.25 million this year guaranteed, next year that $11.25 million is only guaranteed for injury. Only guaranteed for injury.
Got it.
So if he's on the roster after the third day of the league year, then it locks in as a full guarantee. But they can release him before that. So the best plan of action at quarterback right now for the Raiders is to just start Aiden O'Connell for the rest of the way, because you don't want Jimmy G getting hurt and be on the hook for that $11.25 million guaranteed next year. So it makes sense that we're not going to see Jimmy G for the rest of the season. So all you Jimmy G lovers out there, groupies, whatever you want to call yourselves, he's done in Las Vegas as far as I'm concerned, right? I think his time is it because they're there's no way you bring Jimmy G back with the way he's played. And because he's gotten hurt multiple times this year, you don't want to risk putting him out in the field and being on the hook for $11.25 million in 2024.
All right, Professor Moton, thank you for clearing that all up. But it's true. And listen, Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't deserve to play. This isn't just a, hey, you don't like Garoppolo, you want to see the kid. This is he showed nothing. And he appears to be washed. Just
Scott,
simple.
He leads the league in interceptions, and he missed 2 games.
2.5 games.
What is there to say? He has about 150 fewer passes than the guys who have 8 interceptions, and leads the league in turnovers through the air. Maybe he'll look better under another offensive coordinator, but it's just it doesn't pay for the Raiders to put him out there and risk him getting hurt right now.
Do you release him?
No, you don't release him, because at this point you're paying him already for this year, right? So there is a benefit to just having Jimmy G in the locker room. Maybe he can help emergency if Aiden O'Connell gets hurt, if Brian Hoyer is not available or gets hurt. Then you have to start it. You have to start a quarterback, right? Unless you have someone on the roster who has some quarterback background, can play the position. I believe Jacoby Myers may have been a high school or something.
Might be a better choice.
Might be a better choice. I don't know about that lateral he had in New England with the Patriots, but we may not want to revisit that.
No.
But by all costs, you don't want Jimmy G seeing the field. I would even say pick up a quarterback off the scrap heap. I'd rather see Carson Wentz on the field than risk Jimmy G getting out there and getting hurt, and then you have to pay him regardless. So again, I want to reiterate this. The Raiders are only on the hook for Jimmy G's full guarantees, is if he's on the roster past the 3rd day of the new league year in 2024. It's $11.25 million. They let him go before that. They can get out of that money.
Yeah. So they'll basically release him after the season. That's
you could see it happening, unless the new head coach, offensive coordinator is a Jimmy G guy. Who knows?
Oh, oof. Hope not. But we'll see. And that one too, I'm tabling the discussion on coaches for the future because I think it's way too early. I know there's college, there's the Harbaugh and all that stuff. Look, I think you want to be careful too. The Rich Bisaccia thing, I know it keeps coming back up, but interim coaches are there for a reason. I don't know the discussion with Antonio Pierce and Mark Davis. Did Mark Davis say, hey, you're auditioning. If you can turn this team in the right direction, will you get the job? It could happen, and I got nothing wrong with people auditioning because he's auditioning, Champ Kelly's auditioning, and Aiden O'Connell's auditioning. Those are the 3 biggest roles in the football side, the quarterback, the GM, and the coach. Those are the 3 most important positions.
And I posted that on X, and people say, how is Champ Kelly auditioning? Because the trade deadline is already passed. And what can Champ Kelly possibly do to show that he deserves the job? And I answered and I said, if the Raiders win games and the rookie class starts to produce, and you say, okay, we don't want to bring in a new general manager who's going to want his guys most likely, because we all know what happens when new general managers come in. The previous rookie classes don't get as much playing time, and they want to draft their players and give their players that they drafted playing time. So if, let's say, the rookie class, Michael Mayer, Trey Tucker, Aiden O'Connell, those guys look good. Champ Kelly was part of that brain trust who put together that draft class. Dave Ziegler is no longer there. Champ Kelly was a part of that. So you would say, okay, Champ Kelly, Dave Ziegler had a pretty decent draft class after Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler were let go. Maybe we keep Champ Kelly and keep that continuity because our rookie class is starting to show promising signs in the second half of the season. That's how Champ Kelly can keep his job. But again, part of it is out of his control because the Raiders have to win football games. Because if the Raiders don't win football games, it's all a moot point. They're going to clean house.
And their young players have to come. Like you said, you have to see Michael Mayer. Now, hopefully you think with a different quarterback, you might see that some more. You have to have Tyree Wilson come along very, very quickly now. We're at the midseason mark. So we got to start looking at that critically. I'm not sure. I think it's a big if, but you're right. I think that's the opportunity he has. Right. And Antonio Pierce, who doesn't have any coaching experience other than a little bit of high school, I don't think he's a serious candidate. I just don't. I'm not saying he can't do a good job, or maybe he shocks him. Maybe he's another story that's crazy. I don't know. People were fired up because of the press conference today, but let me tell you, people can do good press conferences, and he's a good man. I'm not saying he's not. And everybody's fired up, and that's what you want to hear after hearing a guy who's monotone and boring. But that does not translate on the field always.
I will say he was a defensive coordinator at Arizona State.
Yes,
for a couple years. He was a defensive coordinator, so he does have a little. I mean, not a lot, not a long resume, but he does have experience, I guess, in a play calling position. Now, we all know Patrick Graham is still there, so we assume Patrick Graham is still handling the play calling. But I was on my Bleacher Report Live earlier, and there were some Raider fans that said they don't necessarily want a play caller. They just want a leader of men. After watching Josh McDaniels, they're just longing for a leader. Just give me a leader.
Lead us, give us a pep talk.
Right. And I think
pat us on the head and say we're doing a good job.
And for now, Antonio Pierce, obviously, it looks like he fits that role where he's going to command respect in the locker room. He's not going to get up there and fumble his words, and people are not going to give him the side eye thinking, can we trust this guy? It seems like I can look at Antonio Pierce. I don't know Antonio Pierce from a hole in the wall, right? From a can of beans. But I can tell you, I'd rather be in a foxhole with Antonio Pierce than Josh McDaniels. And it's not because of Antonio Pierce's physique. Yeah. Just listen to the way he talks. And I'm not saying that's everything, but it's a breath of fresh air compared to what you had with Josh McDaniels.
And that's why this move, and again, we're going to get into the critical side of Mark Davis in a minute, but that's why this move by Mark Davis was a must happen. And it's interesting. We talk a lot on this show, Mr. Moton, about how when fans get upset about national media, and we talk about national media here all the time, when they cover the Raiders and how they cover the Raiders, because they're not covering them every day like we do. Okay, so the intricacies of how the Raiders are working, what's happening, is lost on them because they're on whatever story's hot that day. If it's the Jets and Zach Wilson, that's what they're talking about. So they don't even think about the Raiders. So then this pops up, and some of that conversation has been real interesting to me. Yeah, it's surprising, and it must have been really bad. And I'm like, wow, where have you been? Like, have you not seen Josh McDaniels get up at a press conference where they can't score and talk about how well we did win one aspect of the game, and that was the kicking game? I mean, that's forever ingrained in my mind as one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. And but the national media misses that because they're not poring over the transcripts like you and I sitting here at 1 a.m. trying to write a story about the Raiders, right? So I get that. But I do think that you see now all these players. It's amazing when somebody gets let go like that. It's not that people are trying to kick people when they're down, because it's a small world in the NFL, especially if you're a player or a coach. But you have all these players now coming out and say, yeah, his personality. And that leads me to what I want to talk to after we take our final break, which is Mark Davis's role in this. And you talked a lot about it last week, and we did on this show. And I want to delve into that because I wrote about it extensively today. So we're going to take that break. When we come back, we're going to roll on here with Silver and Black today. It's specially live on this Wednesday night, or if you're listening to us on Thursday morning for your usual partaking of Silver and Black today, welcome to you there. But we are here doing it now. So stay tuned where you are, and we'll be right back after these words. All right, we're back for the final segment of this edition, the special edition. The only "you're fired" I can think of is Trump, and if I mention Trump's name, I'm going to get people saying, "Oh, you're a MAGA," and then I'm going to have other people say, "Well, are you woke?" Can't win. Anyway, you're fired. So yes, the "You're Fired" episode of Silver and Black today. It's been a long day. But Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler, Nick Lombardi are gone, and the Raiders now will be under the guise of a new leader, and that is, of course, Antonio Pierce. Moe Moton, he is senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report. I'm Scott Gulbransen. I am an editor-writer at sportsnaut.com, and we host this little show for the last several years, covering the Raiders and their bad coaches and their bad offense this year, especially. But we hope you're good there. The chat's going crazy on Facebook, as you can imagine, Mo. Our man AJ DeMello's in there. He was there this morning, too. So, AJ, you must not have... No, it's early back where you are, so maybe your gig doesn't start till 7 or 8. But can you work into your stand-up routine 2 things? An impression of Josh McDaniels, and then maybe start to do a Moe Moton bit. A Midtown Mo. Yeah, be kind of fun. Well, AJ will let us know.
Never had someone impersonate me. I don't know how I feel about that.
All right. Well, we are talking Raiders football, and we're going to jump into the man who has all of the responsibility in this situation, the man who created the situation, but now has also started to solve it, and that is the owner, Mark Davis. You mentioned last week, Mo, about, look, you got to go right to the top. We've been pretty consistent on this show talking about that, right? And little did we know that if we would have maybe requested an interview with a player, we would have been told no because we're too negative. Oh, boy. So looking at Mark Davis, I wrote a piece up on Sports Not today where I talked about there's only one way he can get the next decision right, and is that he does not make the decision. I argued, and it sounds funny, and I'm not trying to insult him. I'm really not. And I'll use an analogy in a minute, which I've been using all day. What he needs to look, Mark Davis is terrible at football decisions. He just is, okay? He's terrible at football decisions. Just as every time I try to fix a leaky pipe in my house, I don't know what it is, plumbing. I can do electric, I can do wood, I can do drywall, I can do everything. Pipes, for some reason, they're pretty simple, but it just escapes me. I'm not good at it. So when a pipe breaks, if my wife can sometimes fix it because she's handy, if she can't fix it, I call somebody who knows what the hell they're doing, right? Because I know if I keep fiddling with that pipe, my whole house is going to be underwater, okay? Mark Davis can't hire football people. So what he should do, and this was the point of my article, he should hire a president of football operations, and that person, and he says, here's the keys. Here, football operations person, man, woman, whatever you are, here, go. And by the way, I'm going to be at the thing. Tell me when you need the checks. I want to check in with you, 4 times a year to see what's going on. But you hire the GM, you hire the coach, because whoever you are, you're experienced, you've built or been part of a high-end winning program, and you have bona fides, you have people who've recommended you that I trust, big names, people that Mark Davis can get looped in with, and I step away. I don't make calls on John Gruden for 10 years for $100 million. I don't make calls on Josh McDaniels. Mark Davis needs to divorce himself. And Mo, he's already done it. He did it with the WNBA Aces who've won 2 championships. So why can't he do it with the Raiders?
I know a lot of people will bring this up in the chat. And I'm sure, I don't see the chat, but I'm sure the name is in there. Tom Brady. Now that's
yes,
their
page brought up.
There are Patriot ties there, but does he lean on Tom Brady for advice? Now, Tom Brady doesn't have any experience building a football organization or a roster. Tom Brady is successful on the field, but no experience in building an NFL team. So I would still question that. I just want to see him bring in a football mind who's either up and coming or has some success already on resume and go that route. Because, as you said, his hires, while people will say John Gruden improved the team minimally every year, he had his email scandal. I get that, but the contract that contract that he signed them to, still questionable. And the last hire was just completely awful. Like, if you look at the Patriot success rate for Patriot disciples under Bill Belichick, it was very low.
Right.
So here you are chasing a dynasty that is past tense now, and getting the underlings of that dynasty over to Las Vegas when you've watched other Belichick disciples go elsewhere, try to duplicate it, and fail. I don't know. Someone should have been in Mark Davis's ear to let him know, hey, did you look at Matt Patricia? Did you see Bill O'Brien? Oh, he won some division titles, but that went sour pretty quickly. Did you see Brian Flores before he, with the Dolphins?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people like Brian Flores, but didn't mix well with Tua Tagovailoa at the quarterback position, and there was a lot of friction between he and the Dolphins front office.
Yes, and by the way, AJ had me laughing because AJ said Tom Brady could cut Mark's hair. That's about it. And the picture just came in my head, and it just cracked me up. By the way, Vic in Sacramento, Louis Riddick. Why would you think that's a good? I like Louis Riddick a lot. He has player personnel experience, not enough in my view. And do you really want to go get another TV guy? And I think this is one of the points I want to make to you is I think Mark Davis, and Murph brought it up on the postgame show. He said, Mark Davis, whatever you think of him, fine. But he said, Mark Davis he's a people person. He's got a good heart. He means well. But there's lots of people who mean well who can't make decisions that move a business forward, or in this case, on the football side. And so to me, yes, you can say, hey, Mark Davis can go hire the hottest young assistant GM, but didn't he just do that? And how did that work out? Right? So again, he probably looks at all the good in people and maybe doesn't see the bad side. And sometimes in business, you got to be a prick. You got to be the discerning guy. I mean, you look at Al Davis, and you know the stories about Al Davis, he was unrelenting and he didn't care if you liked him. He just didn't care. He wanted to win. That was it. And so to me, Mo, I think he needs a buffer. If he doesn't have a buffer there, I don't trust any hire that he makes. Now, he may make one and it works out. I'm not saying it. But what in 12 years of running this team since his father died, and I know Al had a rough 5 years before that too, but in the last 12 years, outside of the move and those decisions, what decision has he made from a football perspective that's worked out? And again, I'm not trying to malign the man. I'm clearly calling out the facts, just like we did with Josh McDaniels and just like we did with Dave Ziegler.
Here's my question. Mark Davis hangs out with Raider alumni, right?
Yes.
He's hanging out with Charles Woodson, Tim Brown, right? He's hanging out with former Raiders all the time. I'm sure he has these guys in his ear, right? Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, who does he lean on to make his decisions? Because I'm sure he's not making these decisions unilaterally where he's just in his mansion and thinking, okay, these are my 5 head coaching candidates and GM candidates. I'm going to pick one of these 5 guys. I'm sure he has multiple people in his ear saying, hey, that guy may be good. This person may be good. Maybe you should call this person. I'm wondering who's around him, because he's going to have to make a decision whether it's him directly or not. The Raiders are going to have to make a decision on their head coach and GM again in the offseason. And I'd want to know, like, who's in his circle, who's in his brain trust.
100%. Because to me, I look at last time, and again, this is not in any way saying anything negative about somebody. I want to make that clear, because I've met him and he's a great guy, and that was Marcel Reese. Marcel Reese was elevated inside the organization because he was so close to Mark. And then what happened? He left. I don't know. I forgot why he left, but he left. Didn't work out. That's fine. But if Marcel Reese was in his ear, good guy, but not the guy who can make the call to build championship football. He doesn't have the experience. He didn't have the knowledge to do that. Now, if he's just advising him on other issues, fine. Everybody's got their role. Cool. I get it. You want to trust the people who work for you. But I will use the example of several other teams, because in the NFL, most teams are family businesses. I know it sounds crazy because they're billionaires. Oh, you're laughing. What are you laughing at? Comments?
Yeah, it was just a comment that crossed my timeline.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, Scott, to take you off on a tangent, but
there's great stuff.
Parlay Reyna, who's on the X, says, y'all better thank the petition signers. If you don't know, there was a petition going around to fire Josh McDaniels. I don't know how many signatures it had, but basically there were a bunch of people that wanted to fire Josh McDaniels, and she's like, you better thank those petition signers because they got the job done. Again, I'm not laughing at someone losing their job, but it's just the commentary on this, like the side commentary on this, it's hilarious.
It is funny. But to your point about who he listens to, I think that is vital. And I think that perhaps what he needs to do, this is where you got to look in the mirror and you got to say, okay, I listen to these people, and even though I think they're smart and I trust them and I know they're loyal, it never works out. So you know what I got to do is I got to go find who is the best person, even if I don't know that person. I got to go through my network. I got to call. I know it'll sound crazy and maybe he's not the right name, but it just popped in my. I got to go to Jerry Jones and say, Jerry, who can I talk to? Who would you tell me to talk to? I got to get this thing right. I need somebody who can come in and help me with football operations. Who should I talk to? Now, maybe he's not the best example, but you know what I'm saying? He needs to find somebody who can do that and is not bound by a personal, I wouldn't say loyalty, a personal relationship where they won't tell him the truth, and they need autonomy. They got to give somebody autonomy. Now, Mark Davis can always fire that person. He's going to report to him, but he needs, or she needs, the ability to make the moves without Mark saying, well, I like that guy. You know?
I would talk to a former GM that's not looking for a job. Exactly. And I say not looking for a job because you don't want that former GM trying to get his way in the door and get himself a job. I would talk to a former GM who's not looking to get back in the NFL and kind of pick his brain. You know, what assistants did you have on your staff in your front office? Like, who did you work with when you were in the NFL? There are plenty of GMs right now who aren't. I don't think they're looking for a job in the NFL. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong about that. But there are plenty of former GMs out there who are in the media now, like you and I. Of course, they have way more knowledge than we do. And that's what helped Mark Davis in making his next decision. So I would just tap into the guys who've had successful runs as executives in the league and say, who did you work with? What do you think of these people? I have a list of guys that I'm thinking about contacting. And would you hire this person?
Yeah. And that's what they need to do. And I think they need The reason too that this decision by Mark Davis, and again, the decision should be that he does not make the decision. He hires somebody who's in charge of it, right? Be a little more of a. It worked with your WNBA team, Mark. They went out and hired Becky Hammond. They hired a great front office there because he trusted the people to do it. He had never run a basketball. He was never associated with a basketball team until he bought it in 2021. So he said, I just want to sit courtside with Tom Brady, hang out with my blonde girlfriend, and have a good time. And that's what he should do with the Raiders. That's what he does. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's his team. He can do whatever he wants. But I think to me, this is where he can get it right. And that's what I called on him to do in my story, because you just don't make good decisions there. You just don't. So we'll have to see that. Now, we talk about moving forward with this team and what they're going to do under Antonio Pierce. Clearly, the move at quarterback is a big one. We're seeing some progress on defense. But the one thing, and I know people out there want to remain, even in the midst of all this jazz, they want to remain optimistic. But if you talk to people in the NFL who know rosters, they will tell you the Raiders roster has nothing. Doesn't mean they can't be competitive. But if you're talking about building a long-term winner, you have, let's be serious here. You have 3-4 players. 3-4 players you could see helping you get to a Super Bowl if they had the supporting cast. Because of the bad drafts, because of the bad moves in free agency, it's just not there. So the Raiders need to do that. That's why this decision has so many tentacles, Mo. Get the GM who's going to get you the coach, okay? That coach and the system he runs will dictate what kind of franchise quarterback you go draft, right? Or go sign, whatever they decide to do. So this domino effect of the decisions coming in this offseason, really, it's going to be another 25 years of misery, or they're going to start to get it right and build their way out of it.
This is going to come out sideways, but I'll say this. And I want to clarify after I say it. I don't want him to hire another head coaching GM tandem who are buddy, so to speak.
Right.
Because too many times what happens when you get two guys who are or people who are buddy, one person dominates the friendship and makes the decisions, the other person may be kind of laid back. If you get two people who respect each other, they can go back and forth in the draft room during free agency with decisions. It's not just on one person to make the decision because, oh, that's my buddy, I trust him, I'll let him do this and I'll do this. No, I want two people in the room who are not necessarily going to fight and argue all the time, but are going to challenge each other legitimately with some of the roster moves that the Raiders make, because sometimes you could save a person from making a bad decision just by pushing back on them. How many times have you in your life, Scott, have you almost made a bad decision and someone said, hey, maybe you want to think about this? Because I know I'm not perfect. I've almost made some bad decisions, and I've had friends that say, hey, maybe you want to do it this way or try it this way. We're not necessarily close buddy friends, but there's a mutual respect I have for that person, their knowledge, and they have respect for my knowledge, but they're just letting me know, hey, I did it this way and this is how it worked out for me, or I could see it going wrong. If you do it that way, try it another way or choose a different option is what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so but you look at that, and again, there's so many pieces here. The Raiders are at a critical juncture because you have to start thinking about the future. And I look at Davante Adams, and everybody respects him. And listen, he's making $25 million this year. So from that perspective, good for him, right? I don't feel bad for him that even though he's going through a terrible time, going to work every day and not being happy is never fun, no matter how much money you make or what you do. At the same time, I don't see, I know it'll be sacrilege, Mo. I don't see why at this point where you're at, unless Aiden O'Connell, the rest of the season, shows that he is a bona fide starting quarterback in the NFL, like a guy that you're like, okay, we're gonna go with this guy, and hopefully we found our franchise quarterback in the 4th round. Now, that could be a long shot. I don't know, but if not, why would you keep Davante Adams? Is that going to help you, your team? Yes, he's a leader. He's a great player, but if you're 4 or 5 years away, just saying, from being a serious competitor, why do that to him? Why do it to Raider fans?
I guess this is where we differ a little bit. So people are in for a treat here. We're actually going to not disagree, but I get what you're saying. If you're going to do a full rebuild where you think it's going to take 4 or 5 years, I'm sure Davante Adams is not going to be happy with that. But I don't think the Raiders are necessarily 4 or 5 years away from contention. Even if they do tear it down a bit, how many times do we see teams in their first year or two of a rebuild, year and a half, they start to turn it around and make the playoffs? I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't have to be a 4 to 5 year rebuild, even if you tear it down.
Right, but I will use an example to prove your point, but also to debunk your point. Ready? And that is the Philadelphia Eagles. Remember when Nick Sirianni took over? But what did they already have in-house? A quarterback. That's the only. Now, if Aiden O'Connell pans out, then I would agree with you. That's what I'm saying. If Aiden O'Connell, I'm not saying he's your 10-year franchise quarterback. If he is a very good quarterback that can get you to a point where you're a winning football team, then I 100% agree with you. Davante Adams, stay on the Raiders, keep them, build what you got. But if not, then I just don't think you can progress that quickly.
I'll say this, Scott. How many games do you think the Texans will win this year?
They have 3 now, right?
They're,
or 2.
I believe, 3 and 4 right now.
They're 3 and 4.
They're 3 and 4 right now.
They're the same as the Chargers. Yeah. So, and the Raiders are 3 and 5. So, I think they can maybe win 6.
Now, did you have them winning 6 before the season started? Are they exceeding your expectations right now?
They are, because they have a quarterback.
So the Raiders, we don't know what their draft pick is going to be.
True.
I would assume it's going to be top 12. We don't know what the rest of the season is going to, how the rest of the season is going to look for the Raiders. But let's say they get a top 12 pick, they get a quarterback who pops right away, kind of like C.J. Stroud is popping this year. Mm-hmm. You find your quarterback. It's clear maybe he's not winning 11, 12 games his rookie year, but it's clear that he could be the franchise guy. I think that expedites the rebuild. And again, I don't think it's going to take 4 to 5 years for the Texans to be a competitive team in the playoff picture with C.J. Stroud the way he's playing right now. So my point is, it all goes back to drafting, right? The Raiders have drafted poorly for who knows how long. If they finally have a strong draft class, as they did in 2014 when they found Derek Carr, who became their starting quarterback, why can't they contend within 2 years and make Davante Adams happy? I think it's possible. And it's optimistic, but it's not out of the realm of possibility if they get a GM who knows what he's doing in the draft room.
I just don't see 2 years. I don't see 2 years, even if Aiden O'Connell's a hit. So we could disagree on that. I know people are disagreeing with me in the chat, which is totally fine. And Rodney Jackson said, "Did you hear me say, Rodney, that we really don't have enough talent to be competitive?" I did say that. I think the roster's thin. And NFL executives all over the league say it too. And the Raiders, where they're at, is not a good place. Now I know got rid of the coach. They could turn things around, and I could be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong. I'm not saying I'm sitting here on a throne saying they suck and they're going to suck and you can't. I'm not saying that. Mo and I disagree on them competing that quickly because I just don't think they've stacked enough talent to make that jump quickly. But things can change fast. So we'll see what they do. If they bring in the right people, who knows?
One thing I'll say is this, right? And I think I said this in the offseason. I think last year the Raiders should have won 9-10 games, but they blew 5 double-digit leads in the second half. I think that team was a legitimate borderline playoff team. I think this year's team is a legitimate 6-11 team. And that's why I predicted them to go 6-11. Now, they're not stocked all across the roster, but the defense has shown improvements. You have Davante Adams. I think Michael Mayer and Trey Tucker will come along now that Josh McDaniels is out of the picture. We'll see what happens with the offensive line because it's had its ups and downs. We don't know what's going to happen with Josh Jacobs yet. But to me, once you get the quarterback, if you hit on the quarterback, at that point, the sky is the limit. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight like that, but if you get a dynamic quarterback who can get you over the hump and get you to compete against some of these upper echelon teams, it makes it a lot easier to build the other parts of the roster because now your quarterback's on a rookie deal. You're not paying him much. Yeah. Now you could spend big money on defensive tackle who can help out Max Crosby. Now you could spend big money on a cornerback who can seal up your boundary. Now you could spend big money on a linebacker if you're thinking about moving on from Spillane or Divine Diablo. The point is, once you hit that quarterback, there's so many other things you can do to expedite the rebuilding process.
Yes. And I think I had some people pushing back on the Eagles because when Nick Sirianni got, they had this, they had that. Didn't matter. His first year they went 9-8, and then they had the big year, went to the Super Bowl. So they made the jump. Yes, but they had talent on the roster. That's my point, is that you can make a faster jump. You had the quarterback in waiting, and you had the trenches. That's the other thing I want to tell you guys, and that's my big concern with the Raiders. And to your point, you just said it. You can go out and sign some of these guys, and if you draft well, you can accelerate. But the Raiders don't have the Jimmies and the Joes in the trenches right now. They don't, and that's where you win football games. That's why the Eagles were able to make the jump too. They had that, and then they got the quarterback, and they surrounded them. And Howie Roseman is a super GM. He just is. He knows what he's doing. It pains me to admit that because I despise Philadelphia sports, but but he's good, man. He's good.
It goes back to one thing we can both agree on, Scott. You got to draft well.
Cheesecake sucks. What?
Yeah, I agree with that too. But it goes back to drafting. If you don't draft well, it's going to be a slow rebuild. If you draft well, if you hit on a specific draft class where 5 or 6 guys, even 3, 4 guys are rotational players or starters and contributors, then you're working with something. And I think when it comes down to Devontae Adams and making him happy, I think he wants to at least see significant progress, not just minimal or moderate progress. I think he wants to see, okay, who's going to be our quarterback? Do we have a front office that I can trust to see eye to eye with? And is the defense continuing to get better so that the offense doesn't have to score 40 points a game because our defense is giving up, 35, 37 points a game. So I think there are multiple factors there. But I get what you're saying. The Eagles dominant in the trenches, both sides of the defensive line, offensive line. That's what Howie Roseman does. He's always getting an offensive lineman, a pass rusher, defensive tackle. Just look at the depth that the Eagles have there. But like I said, the Raiders aren't going to be strapped for cash. Remember, they're not, as I said early in the show, they're not on the hook for Jimmy Garoppolo if they let him go before the 30th of the league year. They're not going to be strapped for cash and money. They can do a little bit of spending, but as we can both agree on, has to be a good draft class in 2024.
Has to be. I mean, you have to make up. You have to make up a lot of ground there, and so I mean, look, I'm not saying it can't happen. I think you have Max Crosby, who's a force of nature. So if I'm a defensive player, I want to play next to Max Crosby, right? So that's appealing to me. If I'm a free agent, if I can play on the other side of him, if Tyree Wilson doesn't become what they want him to be, or if he moves inside, whatever they do with him. So to me, that's important. On offense, you got to get them. You got to get other players excited with what you do at quarterback, right? Because that's what happened with Garoppolo. You have to do it. And Costas in the thing, the Raiders do not have the best wide receiver room in the NFL. I'm sorry, it's not true. There's a little room in Cincinnati that would argue with you with that. But anyway, if you look at that situation, though, here's the other question I'll ask you. I think how the Raiders go about this is really important. Back to the idea of having somebody in between Mark Davis and the hires is because how you're able to attract players. Raiders have everything you want if you're a player. They have the facilities now, right? Beautiful, second to none when it comes to workout facilities in Henderson, to the stadium, being in Vegas. All that stuff is in your favor. But the one big thing that is not in your favor, even for coaching candidates, if a coaching candidate has an option to go to 3 different places, would you not be worried about, about the turnover and what's happened with the franchise for the last 15 years?
I would have concern, but I'll say this too. If I was doing as poorly as Josh McDaniels was doing, I would expect to be fired. I mean, let's just be honest. If I'm
that's a pretty easy. This one's an easy one. You're right. This one's an easy one.
If I'm poor at my job, I'm waking up every morning thinking they're going to fire me. I mean, right? Yeah. That's we should expect that. But if you're a head coach or GM and you're confident in your plan, you're not going into it thinking, oh, they're going to fire me after 2 years, because you're thinking we're going to win football games, so they're not going to fire me. Right. And I think Mark Davis, even though he's had this early firing with Josh McDaniels, he's shown patience. And I think Vic Tafur kind of painted the picture that despite Jimmy Garoppolo coming in with a bum foot and having to, re-rig his contract, Mark Davis went along with it. He actually brought up the Roger Saffold situation where Roger Saffold had an injury, and Mark Davis actually called off the press conference and sent everybody home. This time he went along with it, even though he probably had concerns and doubts in his head. He trusted Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be okay. He knows the system. He'll get our offense over the hump and we'll look a lot better. So I think Mark Davis, even though he's willing to fire people who underperform, which should be expected, he has shown some restraint and some patience. So if I'm a GM or head coach, I'm thinking if I do well, there's no reason Mark Davis is going to fire me. If the locker room is following me and I'm a leader of the locker room, no reason Mark Davis is going to fire me because we're going to win football games.
And you still have the brand, too. The brand, even though the Raiders have not been a winning franchise for a long time, with the exception of a few years, the brand is so strong. I mean, there's just, you can't escape it. It means so much to so many, and it's still strong. I mean, you can talk to people who've never seen an American football game, and if they see the Raiders logo, they know what the Raiders are. They know who they are. So to be associated with that, and if I'm a young coach looking for an opportunity, where else can I mean, I can look at this and say, I can become that next great Raiders coach. I can be the guy who brought it back. And that's a big deal.
Right. There's an allure to that. That after the Raiders have only had a few playoff appearances in the past 2+ decades, you can be the guy, you could be the person to come in and bring them back to that prominence level, the commitment to excellence that fans have been longing for. Imagine how much your name is going to blow up if you're able to do that. Now, that's kind of a self-serving way to think about it, but let's be honest. We all have egos, right? Guys in big positions, executives, they have egos. They want some credit for stuff, right? To just have your name associated with the Raiders and being a perennial playoff contender again, you're set for a while. You're in that Raider inner circle, like, oh, he brought the Raiders franchise back to what it should be. And I think there's an allure to that.
There sure is. By the way, OC Raiders 13. You ready for this one? I feel like LV Gully is the bad cop and Mo is the good cop.
Man, if you know my history,
I'm like, you haven't been watching Mo on X.com all week. And you know what? That's what's great. That's what I like about our show. You know, and people in here calling me a Charger fan and all that stuff. It's hysterical. But you're in here, and it's funny because you come one show, I'm the bad cop, and then you come the next show. Whoa, why are you so negative? We're balanced. That's what it's all about, folks. No unicorns and rainbows up your ass here, folks. We don't do it here. We just don't do it.
We don't do that here. And I just quick comment about that. Like, there are people who didn't like my commentary, Josh McDaniels. I was basically calling for him to be fired for the past 2.5 weeks.
Last week.
And people were saying, Mo, you're too negative on Josh McDaniels. I understand he's not doing a good job, but we're trying to hope it turns around. I'm like, no, it's not going to turn around. We've seen enough. Wave the white flag. It's cash money done. It's not turning around with Josh McDaniels there. But I bring that up because what you see here is our natural reaction to stuff. We don't get on these shows, and I know a lot of other shows do this on TV, not the small outlets, but some of the major outlets. Hey, I'm going to take this position, and you're going to take that position. And we're going to force this debate conversation. We don't do that. Scott gives me the rundown of what he wants to talk about. I'll add in my suggestions here and there. We'll figure it out, and then we get on the show. We give our natural reactions. It's not pre-planned. It's not. I understand what the person was saying, good cop, bad cop, but I think a lot of it is believe it or not, Scott and I agree on a lot. But of course, like any two friends, any two people, we don't agree on everything, and that comes out naturally on air.
It comes out on air. It comes out with ketchup on hot dogs. I mean, all that kind of stuff.
There you go. Yeah.
But and that's the thing. It's interesting when you talk about a subject, because what I find is it's a very modern and recent development. Now, people always like to think that their opinion is the best one. That throughout humanity, it's been that way.
Yeah.
But most recently, with the advent of social media, is that if you don't agree with me, not only does it bug me because I think I'm right, but you're also an awful person and you should die, or whatever their bent is, right? Wow. You see it all the time. Yeah, you see those kind of things. But again, we're always going to have discussions here, and I'm wrong all the time. And I admit when I'm wrong, I got no problem with it. At the same time, I'm going to give you my opinion, and you can like it or not like it. I don't care either way, but we try to entertain you as well. We don't try to sit here and just tell you where you're going to hear other places. And I think, Mo, I will take a victory lap and go back to last season when the issues by which Josh McDaniels was fired, we have been consistently talking about these issues. We didn't gloss over them when they were winning and say, oh. No, we talked about it even in wins. We not that we're being negative, but we present a balanced approach here. It's like, hey, yeah, they're doing well here, but still they're struggling here. We've always been that way.
The other thing I want to point out is we've always been consistent with the condition of which Josh McDaniels could be fired. What have we said? That it's not just a bad record. If he loses the locker room, he's going to lose his job. And if you read Albert Breer's report, Mark Davis caught wind of that team meeting that happened last week before the previous game after the Bears lost. Yeah. Mark Davis caught wind of the grievances that were aired during that meeting, and he listened to what the players had to say. He basically chose the players over his head coach and general manager. So we've been consistent with that if he loses the main guys in that locker room, the leaders in that locker room, it seems like he did, then he's going to be fired, and that's exactly what happened.
Right. And remember, Mark Davis, growing up as the son of Al Davis, hung around. His best friend was Cliff Branch, a player, right, from the time he was a young man. So and that's why he is so involved with the alumni and why he does so much for former players. That's important to him. And I think, too, that sometimes can cloud judgment, right? Because you can't. But his role in doing that is vital to this organization and keeping its history alive and keeping its players in kind of the family. So focus on that and then go find somebody to get the football. That's all I'm going to say about it. I think we'll talk about it more over time, but we are out of time. We went a little bit long tonight, but it deserved it. It's a big night, and Mo and I got to get back to writing. So we are going to check out. Mo, I know you did a Bleacher Report live earlier today. Somebody was asking about your Bleacher Report podcast, and I said, well, it's the live show on the app, so check it out. But what else you got going this week? I know you have a Sports Knot piece tomorrow, right, on the Raiders?
I'm going to have a Sports Knot piece running on Sports Knot tomorrow, just looking at what can the Raiders do going forward. So what does the second half of the Raiders 2023 season look like? Because I know a lot of people have questions about Aiden O'Connell. Does Antonio Pierce get a legitimate shot to be the full-time head coach? Who are some GM candidates the Raiders may look at? So I'm going to take a look at all of those aspects and take a look at people who have an opportunity to solidify their future with the silver and black going forward, not just beyond this season. So that'll be up on Sports Knot on Thursday. I'm not going to have another Bleacher Report live until after the Giants game. So right after the Giants game, a minute after, I'm going live to break it down. Of course, as we know, as you said earlier, Aiden O'Connell gets another start, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion about that, how good or how bad he looks. Also, I'm also going to be looking at other parts of the offense. Will we see further regression from the offensive line, or will we see it perk back up again? Is Devontae Adams going to get the targets and the numbers that he should be getting? Is Hunter Renfrow now going to work his way back into the rotation after the Raiders stood pat and didn't move him at the trade deadline? So there are a lot of things to look at with the offense and changes with Bo Hardegree taking over the offensive coordinator position. I'll be able to break that down on Bleacher Report Live as soon as the game is over.
There you go. See? Just all that goodness for everyone out there watching us tonight. We will also have our post-game show with Murph and myself. Murph will be in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium, so we'll be able to get a live report from there. Those are always fun because there's lots of drunk people running in the background. It's always a good time. We will also have a mailbag edition later in the week. We got a bunch of voicemails today, 702-900-7689, 702-900-7689. 7869. I'm giving the number out. 7869. 900-7869, area code 702. We will put it in the description of the video, so if you forget it, you can come back to the video in a little bit, and it'll be there. But leave your voicemail. We got a bunch of new voicemails, and we're excited to hear those and to go through those. All right, my friend, I will see you next time.
Sounds good.
Get some sleep, man.
I need it.
All right. For our producer, Mike Robier, and for Moe Moton, I am Scott Gulbransen. This has been Silver and Black Today. Remember, do us a favor. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your audio. And if you're on YouTube, thank you for the chat. Great stuff. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notifications bell there. Until next time, Raider Nation, enjoy your week, and we'll see you Sunday night.